Hey everybody, welcome back to Decode Tech. This will be my last upload before I take some time off for my wedding and honeymoon, so my upload schedule will be a little messed up. I will have 2 videos uploaded while I'm gone, but my normal uploading schedule will start again around March 20th. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. If you've been following along in my How a Computer Works series, we now have all the needed hardware components for a computer to work. But if we were to put these together and plug in a monitor, we would only be able to boot into what is called the motherboard's BIOS. This is where you can control some low-level computer settings, but this isn't very useful for everyday computing tasks. So what we need to complement our hardware is something called, you guessed it, software. What is software? Well, software is instructions for the CPU to run. It can be executable code such as an application, or otherwise known as a program. It could be a library, which is just a file of code that applications use, or it could be just a file of data used by a program. Software comes in either 32-bit or 64-bit. What does this mean? Well, today's CPUs generally come in either 32-bit or 64-bit architecture, and this basically refers to the size of instructions they can handle. Put simply, a 64-bit processor is more capable than a 32-bit processor. So a 64-bit processor can handle larger instructions and access more RAM than a 32-bit. For example, 32-bit processors can only access 4 gigabytes of memory. Even if your system has 16 gigabytes of memory, only 4 gigabytes of that is useful. And the biggest takeaway from this is that you cannot run a 64-bit application on a 32-bit processor, but you can the other way around. For example, if you have a 64-foot table and you try to put it in a 32-foot room, it's not going to work. But if you have a 32-foot table and put it in a 64-foot room, it'll work. It's just not taking up all the available space. It's the same way software works. So if you try to install a 64-bit application on a 32-bit processor, it just won't work. So where does this software come from? Well, it comes from humans called computer programmers, coders, or sometimes referred to as software engineers. And what do they use to program a computer? Well, we said software is a set of instructions for a CPU to run, and these instructions are just patterns of binary numbers. And in software, it is referred to as machine code. And machine code is the only language a CPU truly understands. In the early days of computing, machine code was all they could use to program computers. But this is very tedious and, as you can imagine, difficult for humans to understand a bunch of ones and zeros. So they use machine code to invent what are called programming languages. And this is what almost all programmers use these days. Now, a programming language is just text and is much closer to the English language than machine code would be. And then this text eventually has to be converted back into machine code. So where do they go to program this computer? Well, if a programming language is just text, you can use just a basic text editor then, like Notepad on Windows or TextEdit on Mac OS, although this very quickly becomes impractical with any sizable program. Now, how does this text get from text back into machine code? Well, that's a topic for another video, but if you're interested, I do have an Introduction to Programming series coming very soon, where I'll discuss topics like this and various other programming topics, so stay tuned for that. Now let's take a step back to our computer that has all the hardware ready to go. Well, the first piece of software it needs is a special piece of software called an operating system, or OS for short. So the 3 most popular operating systems are Windows, Mac OS, and the lesser known Linux operating systems. Now, if you buy a computer, one of these will almost always come pre-installed on your computer, but if you choose to build your own, you'll have to take care of installing an operating system yourself. And if you have a processor that can support it, go ahead and install the 64-bit version. Now, this operating system lies right on top of the hardware and closely interacts with it, and then also handles talking to any devices that are plugged into your computer. An operating system also comes with some tools in the forms of applications or programs built in that can help you with basic tasks such as text editing and image editing and various other basic computing tasks you might need to do. These applications then sit on top of the OS. So it's hardware, OS, applications. And then if your applications need to talk to the hardware or to external devices, they go through the operating system. This makes it so each application doesn't have to be nearly as large because it doesn't need all the code written to be able to talk to the hardware and other connected devices. Now, there will more than likely come a time when you want either more or better software than what comes with your OS. So there's several different ways you can do this if you don't want to make your own. You could buy a CD from the store or online that has software, and you can install it onto your computer from the CD. Or nowadays, most operating systems have an application store, such as the App Store on Mac or Microsoft's Store on Windows. Or the most popular way probably these days is just to go straight to the internet and download it from the web. Regardless of how you get your software, there's two big things to keep in mind when you're getting it. One is that operating systems all try to save the same problems, but they do it in fundamentally different ways. So if you have an application that's made for Windows, it will not be able to run on Mac OS, and vice versa. Also, back to the 32-bit versus 64-bit, well, if you have an operating system that is 64-bit capable and a processor that's 64-bit capable, you'll probably want to go ahead and download the 64-bit version of the software you're trying to get. So that's going to do it for today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below in the comments section. If you're interested in just getting to know how to use your operating system better, I do have a Windows Basics playlist, and a Mac OS playlist is coming in the future. Also, please subscribe to the channel. It'd mean a lot to me, and if you like this type of content, you'll get notified each time a new video comes out. So thanks again for watching, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.